Let's bring on board someone who's seen it all come and go over the years. He is the brilliant political columnist for The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh. Welcome, Trevor.
Hi, Kevin. I've seen it, but I've never seen anything like this before.
Well, the way I see it, I mean, you and I have both been around a while. Russell's not a spring chicken either. I mean, we've seen these exoduses before in the run up to an election. I think 1997. I think something like 70 Tories stood down. But what I think the problem here is that so many of these people standing down this time are these huge beasts, people with whom we identify the governing party, or have done for several decades really now. And of course I'm talking about Michael Gove, Andrea Leadsom, Sajid Javid, Theresa May, John Redwood, Ben Wallace, Kwasi Kwarteng. These are all big names. Now, by definition, you have to replace these people with unknown neophytes, people that no one has ever heard of. How do you build a new party around that when the party is at such a low ebb? And what I'm saying to you, Trevor, is do you feel that this could be the perfect storm? Are they in an existential crisis? I think they are.
Yes, I do. And I think, as I wrote in my column this morning, I think that they're not just fighting for their lives in this election, which they're going to lose, but they're fighting for their very existence. Because I think that the Conservative Party is no longer the Conservative Party, and those big figures that you were talking about are only household names, really, by comparison with the pygmies who make up the rest of the backbenchers. They're not the giant names of, say, even 10, 15 years ago. There are no Heseltines, there are no John Majors, and they were on the wet side, so let alone Thatcherites. John Redwood was possibly the only entity amongst them who was a figure to be reckoned with. I mean, he had two brains and was one of the bastions of Margaret Thatcher's government. But the big thing is that not only are the new people that will replace them unknown, but they're not even known to the Conservative Party itself. The election was called in such a panic state, in such haste, that they're scrambling around for people to put up as candidates to replace them.
I believe they're looking for at least 93 constituency associations. Tory associations are desperately scrabbling around trying to find candidates, and they're particularly furious with Sunak for this sudden calling of the election, which we all know he did in a blind panic. But here's the thing: he's the problem, I think. Because he's symptomatic of these Tories who for so long have been terrified of their own shadow. They're terrified to be Tories. They want to be Labour light because they fear that traditional Conservative policies, they might not fit in with this touchy-feely society that we now have. So the only good thing about this election announcement was that at least four bits of legislation coming down the tracks that would have got through now won't get through. So I think it was Lord David Frost wrote the other day that whatever you think about this election date, July the 4th, it was a great day when Sunak announced this. It was a great day for conservatism because we now won't be burdened with the Renters Reform Bill, which was a charter for tenants, would have made it impossible for landlords to evict their tenants for any reason whatsoever. So in other words, they wouldn't have had control over their own property. That doesn't sound very conservative to me. The abolition of short prison sentences, which again hardly a high Tory policy, is it? The football governance bill, which was to sort of basically turn the Premier League into a function of the nanny state, and of course the young people's smoking ban, which was an affront to the libertarian streak that should inform all Conservative policies. So Rishi's technocrat approach to government, his apolitical approach, his left-leaning policies, I think are half the problem. Tories look at this, Tory voters look at all this and go, what is Tory about this? Why did he do all that, Trevor?
Well, he's inherited the mantle of his good friend David Cameron, who did it from the beginning of his premiership in 2010, alongside the Liberal Democrats, who, despite his denials, he deliberately wanted alongside him as in a coalition, so that he would be able to stop delivering his promise of a referendum. In the end, he won almost by accident, outright, and had to deliver that referendum. But I mean, right from the very beginning, he and George Osborne began tearing up all the signposts of Thatcherite conservatism. And that's been a steady erosion. I mean, frankly, all of them are Blairites, and they are avowed Blairites. Michael Gove admits that Blair was his hero, the master of politics. And, you know, the person who just listed those things that you named just a moment ago, David Frost, is one of the few who has a proper deep thought about the future of the Conservative Party and would make at least a decent candidate for the succession, which is inevitable after July the 5th. And he's been more or less barred from running because he is a friend and supporter of Boris Johnson.
You see, again, Trevor, you know, I know this will be the same question. I just don't understand why Sunak doesn't understand that this left-leaning socialism, this technocrat approach, is exactly why people won't vote for them. People want to vote for the Conservatives. Why doesn't Sunak understand that these are not Tory policies, that most of his policies are not Conservative? That's why he's going to lose the election.
Well, the picture on the screen at the moment tells you everything, despite the fact that he's fairly dry in terms of Treasury of matters. He's soaking wet on social affairs.
Yeah.
And that is where the Conservative Party of today and the modern voters part company. There's nothing for them to vote for. And that's the reason why this is going to be a dead loss. I mean, this election is going to be a complete wipeout for the Conservative Party. I did think at one point that because of the concentration on the future, I mean, the fear of execution tends to concentrate minds, but it isn't on this occasion. I don't think that those polls are going to narrow to any significant extent in the next 5 or 6 weeks. And I think that the Labour Party is going to reap a totally undeserved victory on a massive scale, and we'll see a total change in Parliament. And we won't know anybody who's going to be elected. We don't know anybody in the Labour Party right now, and they're going to have a huge number of new ones. And we won't know any of the new Tories if they survive at all.
The undercurrent of all these, this exodus of these MPs, these big beasts, these former cabinet ministers, etc. I mean, they're not just quitting because they've some of them, I guess, will say I've reached a certain age, but I think most of them are quitting in despair. They're quitting because the Tories don't seem to represent them anymore. Lucy Allen, a Tory MP today, has been kicked out of the party, or the parliamentary party, for supporting the Reform UK candidate near her area, because I think she thinks Reform UK is probably what Tories ought to be. But of course the Tories have reacted furiously and kicked her out of the party. As you said earlier, it's Lord David Frost, the still small voice of Conservative calm. Rishi Sunak's trying to ban him from standing because he stands for everything that Sunak doesn't. But that is what's going on, isn't it? These MPs, I mean, Steve Baker is in Greece. He's just gone off to Greece on holiday, basically saying, sod it, I'm not campaigning, I can't be bothered. There's a tone of despair among these departing MPs and former cabinet ministers. And I think that is why the Tories may be facing some kind of existential crisis. Got a load of these MPs, load of these former cabinet ministers who feel disenfranchised from Rishi Sunak's technocrat socialist approach to conservatism.
Yes, I think they're well aware that the moment the election result is declared and Rishi Sunak concedes defeat, there will be a leadership contest, more or less straight away. And the worst thing for them is that they can't see any hope of a move away from that sort of rather wringing wet, soft left consensus. And they fear that among those who are running for, or in the running, people like Kemi Badenoch, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and a few others, Robert Jenrick, that they are going to be swept aside by that common purpose sort of brigade of wringing wet MPs, and another wet leader will take over. What the country and what the Conservative Party needs is what's happening in Europe, which is a move towards the right, where governments and parties are representing the views of voters on issues like mass immigration, uncontrolled immigration, the economy, and some of the social and divisive social affairs like identity politics, racism, and so on. And we're going to drift with Starmer in control. He's now admitted that he's the socialist, which is a remarkable admission for any Labour leader, because Tony Blair deliberately kept away from any suggestion that he was a socialist. This is a guy who now admits that he's on the left, not just the soft left, but the hard left. And we're going to see things of which we have not dreamed under Labour, a lurch to the left on almost every issue. The state will start running this country. And I think the backlash among voters will be strong, but they'll be impotent, because we've now got to have probably a full generation of Labour in office.
I'll tell you what people like Starmer stand for, and it's this. They stand for the power of the state over the freedom of the individual. They think the state is more important than the freedom and the rights and the privileges of the individual. That's socialism for you, and you're right, Trevor, that is what we're heading into. Now, desperately, of course, over the weekend, I'd love to get your views on this, Rishi unveiled his national service plan. Now, I quite like the idea, you know, some of these feckless 18-year-olds, make them do a year in the services, that'll sort them out. But of course, it's just typical, isn't it, of Sunak and his gang. You go, oh yeah, I like that idea. That'll put the cat among the pigeons. And then you look at it. You cannot have national service if it's voluntary. That's what this is. Every kid doesn't have to sign into the services. They don't have to do this charity work at the weekend. If they feel like it, they could say, I've looked at your two options, Mr. Prime Minister, and I've decided what I'm going to do is hang around on street corners, smoking vapes and taking drugs. I'm not going to take part in either of your schemes. If it's voluntary, what is the damn point?
Well, either way, voluntary or compulsory, it's a damn squib. It's not a dial changer. It's not a game changer. It's simply something that's been thrown into the pot at the last minute without discussion or preparation. And it's gone down like a cup of cold sick, not because it's a bad idea, simply because it has taken everybody by surprise. And anything that the Tories do now is treated with derision, even by Conservative voters. It is the way that people have turned off the Tories that will decide the outcome of this election, not because of the warm embrace of Labour and Keir Starmer. And they've turned off the Tories big time. I mean, you and I will have spoken to people around the country, and everybody I know who's been a staunch Tory all their voting lives are saying they will not vote Tory again.
Yeah, that's what Rishi has done. I think he's led them certainly to the edge of the abyss. They are touching.
Not just Rishi.
Yeah.
Not just Rishi. I think that Boris contributed to this, and certainly so did Theresa May, David Cameron. They've all made a hash of politics for the last 15 years.
They certainly have. Couldn't agree more. But Rishi has inherited the mantle, and they are teetering on the edge, I think, of extinction now because of their own stupidity. As you quite rightly said, I meet so many Tory voters who've said, I've voted Tory all my life, I can't vote for this lot. I just can't believe they've done this to themselves, Trevor. And as you quite rightly allude to, a lot of people say, bring back Boris. Boris is so great at elections. My problem with Boris is he's about as sort of conservative as Chairman Mao. I mean, he's a green fanatic. He's a sort of... a metropolitan elitist. He never really cared about the migrant crisis and so on and so forth. He's a Lib Dem eco nut at best. So this call for Boris, he'll save us all, he abrogated conservatism as much as anyone else, didn't he?
I think Boris is a first-rate world-class entertainer, not a politician. I don't think he has a clue how to run a country. No good at management, man management or otherwise. He delegates to people who turn out to be stark raving bonkers, like what's his name?
Cummings.
Dominic Cummings, who
There's
decided
so many
on
to
day
choose from,
two,
Trevor.
I know. On day two of the Boris's landslide, he decided he was no good and he was going to get him out. I mean, this is the sort of person he appointed as the chief of staff of Downing Street to run the government, basically.
Is there anything that the Tories can do to sort of save themselves from oblivion? I mean, they're going to lose this election, but I suppose the best they can hope for is they run a good campaign and they don't suffer complete wipeout. You've seen some of these predictions. If it goes really badly, they may end up with 11 seats or something like that. I'm sure it won't be that bad. But going forward, what can be done to save the good ship Conservatives from sinking forever?
Well, this side of the general election, the short answer is nothing whatsoever. Once the election is over, I think that they then have to start thinking from scratch. Not necessarily scratch. All they have to go back is the way that the Conservative Party was run very, very successfully before David Cameron and before John Major. And they have to look at the way of the world that we have to deal with at the moment, which is a very dangerous world for a whole variety of reasons. Because of China, because of Russia, because of mass uncontrolled immigration, including people who are dangerous to our society. All of these things need to be grasped and dealt with, and the voters will respond accordingly.